one of the things that I really like about this industry is that, community sense and community spirit is pretty much what brings everyone together. And it's interesting to see how communities think, right? And you get that from like the community aspect, from the memes that they create, from the way they interact with each other on Twitter and social media, and also from the governance layer as well. Like there's so many things that are interconnected that then create this kind of map of a like a hive mind, right? Like each community, like Hedera, has its own kind of like hive mind, and people believe in those in certain principles. And then you've got Bitcoin, you've got Ethereum, got all these that they're all believers in some things. And as an independent, as a human, as a person, you have obviously infinite complexity. But then you're talking about a group, and it's very cohesive beliefs. It suddenly becomes not quite like an echo chamber, but something that can be predicted. You can predict how people are going to think in general about this or that if you were to present it to the community rather than an individual.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those areas where kind of the community at large really will tell you where the market needs to go. There's not a lot of cases where this particular market is telling the community what's next. I mean, it's a reactive market to what the community and the culture is actually hoping to see. And when you go against the market, it's tough. I mean, it's really tough to survive if you're going to go against the will of hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of community members. It's going to be hard for you to make a market. I mean, it's kind of that linear system of creating an economy. It starts out as kind of a cult, and Lily Liu at Solana alludes to this a lot. And it starts out as a cult, then you get into culture, then you create a community, and once you have your community, you start thinking about ways to create an economy around that, just like as if you were in a city. Cities typically start out as a handful of villagers. It grows into what do we want this culture to be? Are we all about this specific thing, or a specific belief system? And then once you have a larger community, now you have to start thinking, wow, we have a lot of people here. How do we create an economy and a business for these people? I mean, we need to support them into creating their own startups. We have to pay attention to what their needs are. I mean, you essentially create a digital city and an economy around that. And if you get stuck in just the cult phase, that's where you really get the echo chamber issues. Or if you get stuck in the culture phase, you get a lot of the meme coins, you get a lot of the things that are really heavy on speculation but don't actually
Mhm.
mature into having a real community, and especially they never mature into having a true economy. A lot of it's just based on back and forth speculation. So you've got to take it all four steps to make something big and worthwhile.
100%. Though it does surprise me how much fuel there is in that culture tank, because
A
you still
ton.
see things like Shiba and like all these meme coins and Dodge. Man, they just keep running, right? Like
Yeah.
every time Reddit says like, "Oh, it's a shit coin, it's got no value, it's gonna dump or whatever," inevitably the opposite happens. It's just nuts.
Yeah, I mean, the value is in the culture of the people creating their own economy around it. So it just depends on what the focus is. I mean, coins like that, typically the economy is built on that culture of people just trading those markets back and forth, not necessarily building a lot of applications and bigger technology uses for. I would just say like the general public. Those kind of coins are not really general public accessible type of tokens where they're going to be able to link that to any kind of real technology piece.
Yeah, it's not like a public good or a service that has
Right.
any fundamental value. Uh, I guess the value is a lot more hedonistic. Oh, look, I got this silly dog meme coin in my wallet. Makes me feel good, right? It's not utilitarian value, is it?
Yeah, exactly.
So, how did you get into crypto? Like, how did you like first hear about, I guess, crypto in general, and you thought like that's a thing that you want to pursue?
I mean, I first heard about crypto pretty early on with Bitcoin. Um, I always tell my story, and I tell it in a dramatic way that I bought Bitcoin at $23. And then I
Congrats,
tell the
sir.
second part, and then I tell the second part of the story that I sold it all at $30, and then everyone gets really sad.
Oh,
But unfortunately, yeah, that's kind of how that went. And then kind of one of my first actual, I would say, tokens I really paid attention to I mean, obviously Polygon. I worked at Polygon really early on. Found out about that L2 from Ethereum. Um, Essentially, they're just very much a retail market, and they needed some kind of enterprise focus. People were starting to get interested in how do we utilize this for enterprise applications. I went there right around the same time, actually a little bit before that. I had saw that Google X made a really early investment into Chainlink, and
Hmm.
I was like, wow, okay, like typically Google X doesn't do things where they see any potential of failure, and so I did start to buy accumulate some Chainlink over time,
Right.
and so that was really interesting for me. I just thought Chainlink had a really kind of dynamic roadmap on how they viewed the world around crypto and oracles and transferring that information. um, and then I learned about Hedera actually in like 2018-19. Went through the white paper, watched a lot of Lehman's discussions on YouTube, and I was like, okay, this is something really interesting here. This is very different from a lot of the technology that's out there. I could see some pretty big advantages. Didn't do much about it at the time. I had, once HBAR became available, I held some HBAR, and then moving into kind of going over into Aptos, which is the layer one
Hmm.
that spun out of the DM project, the Libra coin that was built inside of Facebook at the time. And they kind of split off into Aptos, SWI, and I think Linea is the other protocol that a
Right.
lot of those original team kind of split up into. So I was there doing most of Aptos business development. Then I got a call from Hedera, and they were like, would you be interested in having this discussion around coming over? And so I've ever since that time, it's 11 months now. It'll be a year next month being at Hedera. Um, just really kind of seeing how we can move this protocol into the next level. We just we're ready for some advancement. So I'm getting pretty excited.
That's cool, man. What would you say the next level is then?
I think the next level for Hedera is, originally it was all very enterprise focused, and I think today it's still enterprise focused, but it's by nature of the council. Now that worked to a massive benefit to Hedera in the early days when a lot of protocols were really struggling to have any kind of reputation because a lot of large enterprises wouldn't work with them. Whereas
Right.
Hedera, we had these large enterprises come into the governing council, Google, Dell, names like that. They come and they sit on the governing council, and you're like, okay, this network actually has some governance guardrails that work really well. We trust these companies that are here. They help, kind of talk about the network in a way that's different from, the way that DGens had typically been talking about it.
Right.
So Hedera like really kind of skipped over the whole. I don't want to say they completely skipped it over because the community built it, but the community was the one that backed the entire retail market. They're the ones that built all the NFTs, the wallets, all
Yeah.
the DeFi protocols. And I think that's the thing that now, the funny thing is, you go to an enterprise now or you go to an institution now, they want to know your DeFi TVL, they want to know your liquidity, they want to know what bridges that you have available, what custodians you have available. And that was the exciting thing coming into Hedera is like a lot of that work had not been done yet. And we've been doing a lot of that groundwork this year and just really starting to get kind of a foothold on the retail market. And so now we realize like, hey, look, for the next couple of years, we're going to have to really think about this retail market. And it's not just because of the retail market. It is an important foundational piece to getting larger businesses interested. You have to have TVL, you have to have DeFi, you have to have bridges and custodians, and you don't really get the attention, especially of custodians. You don't get any attention from them unless you have significant TVL and liquidity. It's just
Right.
not going to happen. So, I mean, we're excited to really start going into that phase of the business and getting a little bit more focused on those foundational pieces.
That's really cool. I wasn't aware that you have in the council that you got like institutional members in part of your council. I think that's really interesting as a concept in blockchain and in Web3. And I wonder how does that kind of work with the fact that a lot of it comes from like this anti-establishment kind of feeling, this kind of we're gonna do it our own way. do you think institutional input into these products is making it better in a sense, or for the general public as well? Because obviously the funds and everything that they have available and the know-how.
Yeah, I mean, right now they currently, I think they're running in parallel. So the enterprises that sit on the council are really giving us good input as to how a protocol should be built that actually works with their legacy systems or their enterprise sales cycle or the level of
Right.
security that they're going to be asking for, the uptime they're going to be asking for. The benefit of that is that the general everyday user, the retail user who wants to build their business and maybe bring a startup to market using Hedera as their DLT, they already get the benefit of all of that enterprise grade network activity and just going into their product. And there's no difference in you know it's not like there's some significant pricing difference, or there's nothing different for the retail user than there is from somebody like Google building something on Hedera. It's just the same set of code. It's just that we utilize those enterprises to really give us information to how to make the network as robust as we can possibly make it. So they really do run in parallel. It's not like, I mean, Google, I'll refer to Google again. They have Gmail, they have G Drive, they have a lot of things that are available to the average everyday user. But then they
Yeah.
have a lot of enterprises use Gmail and Google tools as the backbone to run their organizations. So we're kind of taking that same approach. But I mean, the retail and individual user and getting people inspired to really see that Hedera is a good place to build your business is the focus now.
Right, right. And do you lean on their technology stack as well, or is it more just advisory role in the council?
Yeah, I mean, well, a lot of them want to implement the DLT into stuff that they're building now. So they're interested in using it for like the AI data provenance. They're interested in using it for tokenization. They want to understand how to use it for payment rails. So yes, they're advising on how to kind of harden the network and make it more usable for an enterprise. But at the same time, I mean, they're building proof of concepts and they're wanting to use the network just the same as an everyday user would.
Very interesting. So, what would you say then is one of the more Web3 driven, or like Web3 enthusiast institutions that you're working with? Because like the landscape that I saw back in 2020, 2021, everyone wanted to be in Web3. And then, the market didn't keep going exponentially, as it, rarely ever does. And then I saw a lot of like strategic withdrawals from the Web3 space, like companies that were, well, a lot of them were, some of them were grifters at the time. You're looking at Ubisoft or companies like that were like, we're going to put NFT into every game. We're going to make every game like you can buy your AK-47s and your skins. And it's like people were like, no, we don't want any of that. Take it away. And obviously, market reacted. People weren't happy. That didn't happen. And that's a recurring story with a lot of organizations that I think started with like the wrong idea of what Web3 and blockchain is and what the customer wants. And then they had to basically just call it quits for a while. So I'm wondering, what are the ones that you think have managed to avoid this and have a good understanding of what this ecosystem actually needs?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of goes back to the first thing we were talking about around getting some clear regulations around how to actually interact with a network that has a utility token. I think there's a lot of council members and a lot of people just in general from the enterprise side that are really interested in diving into Web3. They start digging into it with, their teams. Can we do this? Can we not do that? So many of them are just, they're terrified of holding and transferring a token. They're terrified of maybe operating, nodes. And, our organizations were lucky. I mean, we have council members that are willing to do that. So I'd say, I mean, any organization that sits on our council has already shown they're willing to put their foot forward and say, hey, look, Web3 is serious for us.
Right.
Getting into this industry is serious for us. The ones that are going to have the biggest problems, they don't even apply to be on our council. I mean, they just know that they've probably got 2 to 3 more years until they get some clear regulation before they're really allowed to do a lot of these things. I mean, gaming was a prime example of this. Early on, gaming was like the really hot thing to do, and like you said, like NFTs for transferring assets or like verifiably randomized loot boxes to make sure influencers weren't getting
Yeah.
like dropped the coolest stuff. Like that was cool until a lot of the gaming companies were like, oh, wait a minute, we have to do this with a token. And then they start talking to all their teams and they're like, maybe we don't actually want to do that because if you have on ramp and off ramps, then we have to be concerned about the actual value of this. And then how do we do the taxes? And it just became this big mess of complexity that they were not ready to deal with because, users were not lining up asking for, Web3 kind of features quite yet. Um, Once we start making these things easier and regulations extremely clear across the globe, that's the other thing. I mean, there's some regional arbitrage where there's a lot of benefits of doing this in some regions and not in others. But gaming companies are global; they have to make sure this is accepted everywhere. The other thing is ensuring that they just create a good game. I mean, gaming companies want to make great games, and I think we can all probably
Not all of
agree.
them do. Not Ubisoft. Sorry to interrupt.
I mean, a lot of the original Web3 games were not good games. They were bad games that just had like the first couple of levels had some cool speculation and token grinding to like get you to earn some tokens, but like overall, not great games. So we have to kind of graduate from that into getting good games, getting clear regulation. But all the people on our council, I mean, they're obviously deeply interested in Web3, or they wouldn't even have engaged with us and be sitting there today.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a very good point. It's getting people that are actually interested, and gaming is I think it's such a great like marrying of the technologies because like blockchain can really push a game, to do things that we wouldn't even think of up until blockchain, right? Like imagine having an interconnected network where you can import like your armor or your weapons like in between different games and use them in other games. Like it's just like the possibilities are almost endless. I think there's also been a few good, I think, companies that have started to build with Web3 in mind, but not to, not to make it a disservice to the people, but actually to figure out what are the use cases. I think I was talking to Steve Wade from Midnight. They've built Evergreen, and they have like a collection of different games that kind of all fit into this like almost meta world where the things that you do in various games affect your main character in this main kind of universe world. um, and I think we're
I mean,
just going to see.
that's what I've wanted to always see, and this is kind of the benefit to publishers. Like if you have several titles, and you can figure out a really good schema where if a weapon in game A can be ported across as a skin in game B and maybe a vehicle in game C, but you're all within the same publisher universe, that really benefits them. And they can stay within that single publisher, go across multiple titles, and still have a lot of those assets that operate on all of the games. I think the other thing is like one of the things to do, a lot of game publishers, they're really like, oh, we don't want to do that because we get so many speculators in our games. Like they're just there to like earn these tokens or do these like small activities, and then they just leave and they don't play the game. And that's kind of a game design issue where you
Yeah.
shouldn't allow earning until maybe like level 3 or 4 or 100 hours of gameplay. Like gate gate the time frame that gets a user involved in the game for a long enough time to where they're bought in, and then unlock the earning aspects or the aspects of web3 that make it a lot more cooler. Like
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't let people earn all that stuff from day one. They'll just create a bunch of different accounts and speculate and grind out the mechanics and just to earn the token. So I mean, lock that stuff up until someone's put in some work.
100%. And just, just look at how MMOs do it. You look at World of Warcraft, you
Yes.
look at other MMOs, like you don't start earning the good loot when you're level 1. You really grind your way, you do dungeons. The possibility of drop for rare items is pretty low anyway, so you're going to have to keep doing these things, keep you engaged in the game, maybe even spend some money on the game, like they're really well thought out to keep the players engaged
Yes.
for the long run. And I mean those concepts have been tested for a long time. I would think it's fairly an obvious choice how to design a game in a way that keeps the users enjoying the game itself rather than figuring out, okay, how can I exploit this as quickly as I possibly can.
Yep. Totally agree.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll see something. We'll see some new developments. I would really love to see like a new like MMO AAA style, but like be actual, when I say Web3 based, I don't mean have its whole identity be Web3, because I think that's also not a good thing. You don't want a game to just be, what's unique about this game? Oh, it uses blockchain and it's,
Right.
doing ledger things. And like, I don't want to know that I have to sign every transaction when I do a sword attack or whatever. I just wanted to give me a great experience. I couldn't care less about the technology under the hood. Maybe I would, because I like to nerd out on things, but I'm sure a lot of people would just wouldn't want that to be like the unique thing about that
Yeah,
game.
I mean, it should live in the background. I mean, I know that one of the ones that it's built using some Hedera technology, like Tashi. Tashi's a cool kind of system where it just, instead of doing live real time transactions for every single thing, it just settles at
Hmm.
specific points and updates, and it just kind of lives in the background. You just have, and that's how it should be, just a really good game experience, and let the technology live in the background. It shouldn't be the star of the show.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Same thing with AI. I feel like, again, there's so much potential when it comes to AI in games, when it comes to introducing LLM and just giving NPCs like a brain. I've been watching videos of like, I used to play Skyrim a lot like 10 years ago, right? It used to be like this fantastic experience. And people have been modding that game still. It's been 13 years since
Oh my
Skyrim was
gosh.
released. People are still modding the game. They've been adding LLMs into Skyrim, and they've been giving like NPCs their own personality. And you got a little you can talk to them. You can use your microphone, and you can ask them to tell you about the world and what quests you should do. It's like, it's really really cool.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that was happening.
Yeah,
That
it's
is
like an
cool.
emerging thing. It's I think it's very it could be, I guess if you have it locally, then it can be quite computationally heavy. If it's not
Yeah.
local, then you'd have to rely on an AI. You have to rely on OpenAI, or hopefully something that's not as close source as OpenAI. Um, but you need to rely on constant API calls, and if that's a pricing that, like, the pricing model could bleed you dry if you just wanted to enjoy the game. Um, so I guess there's some challenges there, but it's super interesting, and I do see many really powerful AI applications in gaming, and I mean other aspects too.
Yeah.
I know you guys have quite an important like stance when it comes to AI in blockchain, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a pretty core area. I think we have some pretty significant solutions for. So, I mean, we've really been focused in that area, just because of the some of the unique capabilities of the technology in general. Um, yeah, it's a really good match to have the Hedera DLT and AI kind of work together.
So what are the actual applications of AI that you're envisioning or that you're working on at Hedera?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest ones, and kind of to your point, is these. So first of all, like, the data models become so big, and there's so much data that goes into these models that if you had to run all of them on a general DLT, it could become very expensive.
Hmm.
And we obviously have incredibly low and fixed costs. So if you're doing cost modeling, everything's a fixed priced in USD. With Hedera, it's not really subjective to gas fees. But really, what people are doing is you're really wanting to create version control within your AI models. So as you're training these models, you want to tokenize the pieces of data going in.
Right.
Once you have the model kind of set the way that you'd like it, you could lock that model down as a specific, let's just say, like a specific NFT. So if you're along the time of you building a model, you start to see let's say you've made a data update, and all of a sudden the model's just like not working really well. You can go back in and just remove that token, and then you go back to your previous version. Or once you have a version you're really happy with, you want to lock this down. Let's say it's let's say it's a verified model from some major brand or publisher. It's like the whatever brand official chatbot, and you've locked this down as an NFT. And now you start thinking about the possibilities. Or let's say it's an influencer. An influencer trains their own LLM, locks that as an NFT, and says, "Look, if you want the official data I've put in as an influencer, as a celebrity, um, you can license that model. You can license my likeness, my image, buy, sell, trade that model as an NFT." Really, it's the data governance of what goes into a model, and being able to tokenize and verify that data going in. Um, and then obviously there's starting to be a lot of standards around AI. So,
Right.
moving very quickly, people want, at least governments around the world, are wanting people to prove how those models were trained. And using a DLT to go back and point to these tokens, not just point to the tokens, but the data going in, but then there's also identifiers for who the individual was that updated the model. So you can start to see what data was put in by what person, and then you can have those be transparent for regulatory purposes. And then on Hedera in particular, not only is it a cheap and fixed cost, but the way that it's not a linear settling blockchain. We obviously have Hashgraph, which doesn't necessarily rely on linear blocks. As computing power kind of increases over time and you have these linear settling blockchains, there's always it hasn't really happened yet, but there's always that possibility that somebody, a bad actor, could sneak in. Like if your transaction happens at the front of a block and you're waiting for the entire block to settle, somebody could come in and tamper with that block if it doesn't settle quickly enough. So just having our data kind of instant settle has been a really big differentiator too, because you want that data verified and to complete finality as instantly as you possibly can.
Right. Right. Well, I'm not a cryptography expert, but I understand that a hash graph works a little bit different than a blockchain does. It's still an immutable ledger. You still rely on a consensus mechanism, but you use a different way to process. Well, you can process multiple transactions within a block at the same time. Does that also mean that there's no room for front running,
That's right.
that's correct, right?
Yeah, and that's why on the tokenization side for financial institutions, a lot of them are starting to look to us because you're not going to have front running of trades. A lot of online gaming companies look to us because you're not going to be able to front run possible online gaming transactions. It's an ABFT consensus, so I think we're the only one out there, layer one, that has that, where all nodes know all information at the same time, and it settles instantly, and not in linear blocks. So, um, a lot of people, especially for tokenization and AI, that is one of the things. Not being able to front run, and then bad actors not being able to jump in between a linear settling block, has really gotten people to pay attention to us.
Right. That's really important. Like I know there's a lot of companies now that are talking about solving all these issues with front running on EVM chains. Right. There's a lot of companies that are doing that, and they're doing some amazing work. But the fact is, that consensus mechanism, the fact that miners are able to cherry pick the kind of transactions that they want to verify from the mempool, like it always felt like a strange protocol to me. Like why would you let them do that in the first place?
Yeah, yeah. I'm happy that I am not smart enough to be the person that solved that, but thankfully we've had Dr. Lehman Baird had that consensus mechanism from the original white paper. So I mean, it's getting close to almost a decade now. He had already solved this problem. So
Wow.
we're really thankful that we have him.
Yeah, no, that's epic stuff. I wanted to go back 1 second because you've said that training a model, it has a fixed cost. Could you explain what do you mean by a fixed cost?
Yeah, well, so the Hedera consensus service, it's just fixed cost in USD, very low cost. So and this is one of the areas where it was really important for us to have our governing council. We were talking about before, the way that enterprises think about using DLTs.
Hmm.
um, when you have a CFO come to you and say, we need your protocol to be fixed, a fixed price where we can do a predictive cost model, because I can't go to my board of directors and explain to them that now our financial model's broken because a monkey picture got popular on the other side of the world. And so, like,
Right.
it's funny, but it's a really good point. Like, imagine explaining that to an executive at your organization, that your entire forecast and your entire financial model is broken because, like, some random application or a random game like blew up, or some meme coin like on the network is making gas fees go insane, and now you can't run your critical infrastructure at the cost that you had hoped it would be. So on AI models, when you're training that data going in, and you're putting that much data into a model, having that fixed and extremely low cost available, how much you're going to spend kind of going into the future. It's a
Right.
lot. a lot more predictability for people and individual builders. I mean, startups, you want low cost and you want to be able to predict
Of
your
course.
costs. I mean, that's something from top biggest enterprise in the world to individual builder. You really need some predictability in your cost modeling.
Right. So it's predictable. It's fixed in the sense that it's fixed per token or per a certain amount of data used, but not fixed as a, hey, this is what's going to cost you at the end of the month. It's going to cost you like, I don't know, 1 pence per token or whatever you choose.
Yeah, I mean all of our pricing is published on our website. So I
Hmm.
mean a smart contract, a token, a consensus transaction, they're all priced a little bit differently, but I mean all of those are published publicly, and you're able to create your models based on just knowing what those costs are going to be.
That's super interesting. So does that mean that then Hedera's own finances are variable, the margins for this? Because obviously, if you offer a fixed rate, then either your profit is variable or there's some other mechanism in place that ensures that the cost is always around the same for these computations.
Yeah, I mean that the variability lands on us, but it's easier to have us manage that variability and have a lot of users than it is to push that variability onto the end user and just have chaos. I mean, we would rather give that stability to our end users, and we can figure out from a variable nature how to adjust our costs much easier than trying to do that for hundreds of thousands of end users. It just becomes really difficult for them.
Right. So it's like taking the whole concept of gas out of the picture. You don't have to worry about it.
Right. Yep.
That's very cool. That is a really good way of dealing with this. And does that maintain, I'm guessing, the same kind of protocols for consensus mechanisms for like are your miners and stakers, I mean, stakers incentivized to operate in the same way?
Yeah, I mean, all of our council members operate nodes. And again, because the cost is so low, the energy cost is incredibly low. I mean, we're by far the greenest blockchain out there. Um, there's not a lot of costs associated with managing nodes on our network. So, we're pretty lucky with that.
Yeah. Nice, man. And has this always been the case with Hedera? Was this thought out from the very beginning?
Always, yeah, always has been.
Very cool. I gotta say
Yeah,
that's very cool. I did obviously I knew about Hedera and I've been following along with the development, but it's nothing I've kind of like got into using myself. So it's really nice to hear that there's all these quality of life improvements that you guys work really hard to put out there. And
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, you should
congratulations.
you should definitely check it out. We'd love to have you at least play around with it.
100%. Where do I start? What can I what coding languages, what programming languages can I use to build stuff on Hedera?
I mean, it's EVM compatible. You use a lot of Java, but you can go in on our GitHub. Obviously, we've donated the whole base code to Linux Foundation, so it's fully open source. Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust under the name Project Hyro. But
Okay.
that's the full Hashgraph code. You can go through Hedera.com, and then there's a ton of different entry points where it says if you're a developer, it'll take you right to all the docs you need to use.
Right. Okay. So not any specific language. You've got different compilers. I'm guessing different people have built different compilers
Yeah,
for pretty much every
totally.
language.
Yep.
Super cool, man. I might take you up on that. I might just have a play with the
You
Hedera
should.
ecosystem.
Yeah, it'd be cool.
100%. So you're obviously working on RWA tokenization, and there's a lot of discussion on RWAs. I think they're definitely a huge upcoming thing. What innovations do you guys have in this category, and is there anything cool that you want to get into?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main one of the main things we talked about is just the way that we handle consensus, kind of getting rid of front running. The other thing is, it's really efficient and low cost to do tokenization, especially if you're going to do these in a really large scale. So, I mean, we have our asset tokenization studio, which it's
Hmm.
like a simplified creation management tool. You can tokenize assets using templates that are on there. It's super user friendly tools. So, um, really, just the speed, the low cost of transaction, and it's regulatory compliant. So, our public network, it's kind of built with native support for KYC and AML. So, I mean, you need to have those things when you're making customized tokens, and whatever those may be. So, that's one of the things that we're trying to make it as easy as possible for people to take those assets, and tokenize them. I mean, we saw that with the Archax announcement even this morning. State Street Global Advisors, I think Fidelity International and Elgin have all
Hmm.
utilized Archax, who uses Hedera to tokenize. Archax has tokenized their interest in those money market funds, and
Okay.
it's a really easy thing to do for most people. So I mean, yeah, we encourage people to do that. We think we're one of the best at it. Of course, I'm biased, but um,
Yeah,
I would
actually,
say,
that's one of the it was really funny thing that I was talking about in a previous episode. We were just talking about marketing, like marketing lingo, marketing speech, and how everyone goes like, "Oh yeah, it's the best product we've ever built," if we say so ourselves. And I get it, I get it. You got to say it, but at the same time, I feel like it's become where everywhere you see just everyone says, oh, this is the best thing, this is the best bread you're going to buy in London, or this is the best uh, shake you're going to buy in California or something. Like, obviously there's something wrong there, and I do think that we probably don't have as much regulation in marketing products as we should. Like, people are like, the more you look into products, the more you look into marketing, the more you see that people are normally taken advantage of. Products that are naturally sugar free, it means that they just have added sugar. They have added not they have like not actual sugar, but like substitutes for sugar. And like, I could go on,
yeah. I
just
mean, we always encourage people, like, try out everything, but I mean, really, there's a couple, like, areas like tokenization, AI, using the consensus. It's We love for people to try these out head to head. Like,
yeah.
we love it, and like, we think it's important because, I mean, if you're really trying to find a combination of scale, speed, and security, and again, like, we encourage people to test this in any format they want to. I mean, we really do feel pretty confident in what they'll choose.
Nice, man. And what do you think the I mean, not think, but what are the some of the specifications of Hedera then, in terms of like transaction throughput, time to finality, and these kind of things?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're right around 10,000 TPS. Finality's 3 seconds, and it's true finality, not like, hey, you're just now starting a block type of finality.
Right.
Um, so I mean, it's fast, secure. Things settle, fairly instantly. Some transactions happen faster, some happen a little bit slower, but in general, we're right around that area. The 10,000 TPS, that's been tested. We could probably push higher. We haven't even started a lot of our work on sharding, or how we
Hmm.
actually do that. So once we start moving into like sharding, or doing, I mean, potentially, again, this is not stuff that's out there. But if we start doing sharding or layer twos or things like that, I mean, we could be 10x, 20xing those kind of numbers. But again, like, we haven't even started that work, so I'm
Right.
hesitant to say that. But
So
that's
I'm
just
guessing there just hasn't been a need for that currently.
not right now. I mean, 10,000 TPS seems to work pretty well for for most people. Um, that's magnitudes faster than the Visa network. So until we're starting to do as many transactions as a Visa credit card, I think we're pretty good where we are. But again, I mean, you start combining all these use cases. So if we start running, financial rails and gaming projects and sustainability and ESG projects, all of those coming together, I mean, that kind of
Mhm.
throughput is really needed. And I mean, we could increase that over time too.
And what are some products that you think are really cool in on Hedera that people, like maybe the general public, hasn't really heard of? Like, anything that, because I think you're in a unique position to kind of look at all these new products coming in and people building these things that maybe not a lot of people are aware of.
Yeah, I mean, Prove AI is one. So Prove AI was the former Casper Labs team. They've decided to come over and build their Prove AI model on Hedera as a network. I mean, we have a lot of DeFi protocols out there that I think are becoming really interesting. Saucer Swap, Bonzo Finance. So lending and collateral protocols, and DeFi. There's karate combat, which is like an MMA sport, which a lot of people have seen out there. It's actually growing quite a bit of following when it comes to people actually going to the events and watching these fights happen. But they have a token that's been created for gaming called I think it's called the Up Only Network, and but they've tokenized a lot of the way that they do fan engagement, which is really interesting. And then
So
there's
it's
all the
real fights with a gamified
oh,
mechanic.
it's absolutely real fights, and if you look them up, they're I would say they're probably the third most popular fighting kind of organization now
Oh
behind
wow.
UFC, and there's a professional fighters league. So behind UFC and PFL, I think Karate Combat is starting to be at number three. We actually had Mei Chan, who is the CEO of Hashpack, which is one of our biggest wallet providers. She actually fought in one of the fights. So sometimes we do the like the crypto fights there. So like crypto founders and stuff will come and kind of fight each other.
So
Really
wait,
interesting.
when BitBoy had that unhinged boxing match, was
Yeah,
that on Karate
yeah,
Combat?
absolutely.
No fucking way.
Yeah,
That's epic, man. That's
yeah,
fantastic. That's
yeah.
just so iconic.
There's a lot of really funny matches on there.
I will be
Um,
checking that out.
but I mean, that's just part of it. I mean, there's some real very legit fighters that are on there
Right.
too. That I mean, there's been some really good highlights from those. But that kind of buzz is like really interesting that people don't really even knew that was like built on Hedera, because they just think enterprise
Right.
chain is what it is. But I mean, we have tons of NFT projects, wallet providers, bridges, and then simultaneously we have it's really funny because our governing council members, they'll come to governing council meetings, and these are like huge organizations, right? Like
Yeah.
Standard Bank and Nairobi Securities Exchange, and it's like they're the ones talking about, did you see the latest karate combat fight? And it's like okay guys, like we did. So they're the ones that get hyped up by some of the other use cases that we have simultaneously, building their own. um it's really cool to see.
No, that's super cool. Like I always thought the crypto kind of community has added something, to companies, to organizations that wasn't there before. As I feel consumers get more and more, critically aware of products, and they understand how a pipeline works, and they get more closer to the product itself. Like as a user, you can actually get as close to Hedera and all of Hedera's products as you want, right? You can go to GitHub and you can check. So I feel that also creates a different level of communication, which also means that it can be fun. It doesn't have to be like super sanitized.
So it's really funny, and I'm hesitant to say this, but I'm going to because it's hilarious. So one of the karate combat matches, Haley Welch went to, and most people know Haley Welch as the Hawk girl.
Yeah.
So she showed up at one of these karate combat matches. Everyone was taking pictures, and like the next day we had a council meeting, and council members were like, "Oh, did you see who was at the karate combat?" It's like it's the fun. I won't name names, but it's funny to see that enterprises pay attention to the places where culture is kind of navigating. And that's one thing I've always wanted people to know is these enterprises are not ignoring retail, and they're not ignoring where culture goes. They are, somewhat moving at the pace that they're allowed to move. And I think we should cut them some slack, be there to educate too. That's the other thing is, right now a lot of enterprises and regulators too, they're really looking for education. I mean, all of us that work in this industry, we see it every day. We see it from morning until we go to bed, and these other people don't have the benefit of doing that. So I think it's important that we actually do, instead of just making fun of them all day or saying they're normies or they're terrible. Like give them give them some information they can use to go back to their organization or their constituents, if it's somebody in government, some good information they can use to make them look like a superstar. Like that will go such a long way. I don't think people realize it.
Oh no, I completely agree. Like I feel that yeah, okay, sure, it's fun to just poke fun at, like big organizations just moving slowly, but that's just how they work, right? Like there's such this
Totally.
is it's like you're thinking about this entity that is just has so many moving parts. And the bigger it is, the more complex it is, the slower it's going to be. Just getting sign off from 15 different departments to do one thing, right? And definitely completely agree. Better to just get them on board and to, spread the like the learning of it rather than to poke fun and alienate them from it. 100%.
Yep.
And I think that's how it all gets. It starts to be a bit more, an inclusive space where you get these bigger companies to actually come in and do something positive rather than be scared that it's all full of like crypto bros that are just gonna like, just what I mean.
But 12-year-olds making a token and running away with
Yeah,
the bag.
yeah, exactly. Fuck
Yeah,
you, got the
yeah.
money.
It's
Yeah,
definitely not that. And I think the obviously those are the stories that get the attention though, right? Like anytime you see something crazy happen, it's going to get all the media attention. But that's
hundred
that's not
percent.
that's not really what we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
No, 100%. And I kind of like, I blame the media, and not necessarily the social media. Social media is like this, hive mind that kind of does whatever it wants. Though you could argue that some actors can influence that more or less. But I blame like traditional media, like old media, for this kind of stuff. Like back when we had, the COVID lockdowns and everything, and they just blew the gravity of the situation out of proportion. And it's always happened. Like when there's a crypto hack, everyone goes like, "Oh, this chain has been hacked for that amount of money. Is this the end for this chain?" Or, like, no, fuck you. It's
Right.
not the end of the chain. It's that it happens. Look at how much of the fiat currency is being used to just buy illegal drugs. You can't even measure because it's so much of it.
I
You
mean,
know,
how many people get their debit card stolen every day or their credit card and just have somebody else completely defraud them of money? Like you just never see any news about it. It's just because it's so normal and it's been so normal for so many years that this is kind of like the new and interesting thing to point to. But I think we're actually doing a pretty great job at maturing as an industry, and not any slower than any other industry. I mean, when the internet first started out, it was typically like, I mean, the two things you could do was either, pornography, or you got to see message boards where the punk rock bands were kind of showing up, and that was it. And
yeah.
then, 1994, Pizza Hut comes along and they put a website up, and everyone's freaking out. And they're like, "What does Pizza Hut got a website for?" And all they did on there was collect email addresses, and it confused people so much. They're like, "Why does Pizza Hut like want emails? Like this is the weirdest thing ever." And then 1997, Bank of America puts a payment portal online, and guess what pizza company has all the email addresses to do online ordering and delivery from? It's freaking Pizza Hut, because they had enough foresight to see where the trend was going 3 to 4 years later. And all they needed was one financial institution to join in. And from that point, it's game over. Like it's e-commerce like on steroids. Like people put, I mean, having your credit card's probably saved on the internet right now. Like you don't even have to type it in anymore. Like that's
Oh
how
yeah.
much people trust it. And so we're kind of going through that same trajectory of, manual input, saving your seed phrase. Like everything seems hard and clunky right now, and cartoons and weird things that don't make sense. But we're going the exact same trajectory that the internet went. And it's only going to take a handful of people to start that critical mass and a handful of companies. And then it all tips over and it all starts to run in the background. We all, have the benefit of having this kind of verified technology ensuring. And I tell you, like the more with AI and deep fakes and the way that data is being used, having verified data is going to be very important. I mean, it gets to the point where IoT devices, let's say like a camera that's pointed towards a traffic intersection, that's going to have its own account, because the data coming from that verified account, you're going to have to make sure that that's the real camera feed. Because we already see people just like faking camera feeds, like, oh, look at this, war crime that happened, or look at this, this traffic incident that
Oh yeah.
happened. Come
Oh
to
yeah.
find out, it's a totally staged and fake thing. It's not even from a real device. So like these are things where you start thinking about scale of account creation and how many transactions actually have to go through a network. Scale becomes a really important thing to think about.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I've also seen like legit uses of AI CCTV systems too. like a lot of retail uses them to identify like purchase intent. They look at metrics like average dwell time, like how much how long do people spend in front of a product, and does that influence, where it is placed in the store? Is there a higher like conversion rate if we put a product on the gondola versus if you put it at the back of the aisle? Or like, there's so much like AI of AI being used in CCTVs. It's wild that, I don't know how good that data is being anonymized. I don't even know if it's anonymized at all. Like,
Right.
my face could be owned by like 1,000 different retailers for all I know.
I mean, I guess read the small print on that, because I'm pretty sure it is, that data is probably owned by the retailers. Not only owned, but they're probably able to sell and transfer that to other people too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, look, is this guy that's only looking at like the black clothing department? You just you want to buy you want to buy his data set? It's crazy. Yeah, and I'm sure you're right. I'm sure that if I was to read the fine print, like it would probably be on there somewhere. Just as it is with Adobe, they had a thing a couple of months back, and it's been resurfacing now. They've updated their terms of service. A lot of people think it's with regards to their new like AI features, but some just think it's just for general purpose. Every creative that you build using Adobe is licensed, sub-licensable, and licensable to Adobe to distribute, to showcase, and to modify as they wish, royalty free.
Wow, I did not see that, and I use a lot of Adobe products.
Same.
That is a good call out.
Honestly, yeah. Look at the terms of service. Just
That's
a quick
crazy.
search
I
on
didn't know that at
looking through
all.
their terms of service. I think it's point 4.2, section 4.2, and you'll
Ooh,
see how it's very clearly stated that everything that you create can be licensed, sub-licensed, royalty free for any purpose that they wish, which could also include
that's
selling it as AI data, using it as straight AI data, using it for their ads or whatever. Like, that's just a license to steal your content. So now tell me again, who's actually pirating here?
I mean, that brings up a really good point, and that's why, even tokenizing the data and the person who's giving you the data going into these models is important, because if you're going to give remuneration or micropayments to people when this model is used, that's the only way you can do it. Acor is a company that builds health data and health data models on Hedera, and that's one of the things they do is, if you're going to contribute your health data and to some of these studies, like you should probably be compensated for it. So, tokenizing that data and understanding how to make those micropayments to people contributing, I mean, that is going to be a giant economy.
100%. And I feel people need to be more aware of how their data is being used. I feel like terms of service is not good enough. I feel like terms of service is like the cheeky way of doing it. Oh, just stick it there on like page 28 out of 455 pages of small fine. And it's not just small fine print, it's also like legal speech that you have to sift through. So you literally need a legal expert, or to take this massive document and feed it to an AI and then just be like, can you decipher this for me, please? It's again one of those cheeky ways, like was going back to marketing speech, is another one of those cheeky practices that a lot of companies do to just get away with doing the bare minimum that's legal, and then I feel like we're at a stage where, look, I think people want a good product, and I feel like people are willing to pay more for a product that gives them more value and respect towards their data, rather than cutting corners, providing a lesser service at a slightly smaller cost. And that's in the good case, because it might not even be a smaller cost. Like, a lot of them are agreed, they even charge the same or more, and just trying to get away with doing as little as they possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, the value of data going forward is, I mean, exponential, and that's
Yeah.
why I think, I mean, right now, just anything you sign up for, go into it making the assumption that your data is being used for something, some kind of monetization. Like, there's a very high likelihood that that's already happening. But, the good thing is using a DLT again. You start tokenizing this data of consumers. I mean, it unlocks a whole lot of different things where, I mean, obviously, like, Apple has already deprecated a lot of cookies within, things that they use. Google's deprecating third party
Yeah.
cookies, I believe the end of 2025. Companies need first party and zero party volunteer data from people, and they're going to have to pay for it. I mean, they're going to have to pay people some kind of micropayment in exchange for their data moving forward. And then housing that on DLT, making sure that there's either just a hash of the data that points to the full PII, or doing something else with it, just to ensure that it's safe. It's, I mean, the personal data of people is being utilized so much right now that I think it's time, the individual user actually gets some kind of reward for that. And micropayments on DLT and using crypto, that now makes that possible. In the past, the big excuse was, well, we're not going to pay you 25 cents because we have to process a check and we have to like mail it out. It's more expensive to reward somebody than it's even worth it. Well, now, I mean, through crypto, you could be sending people almost like streaming payments. Like you're getting live stream micro payments every time your data is used. It's basically cost nothing. I mean, they should be doing this already.
Right. Yeah. And you could get something like a royalty program, right? You're using my data. You pay for it as you use it. Like Spotify pays per stream, but then Spotify's not a great example. They barely pay bands per stream, so not the best kind of
Yeah,
approach. Don't do that. Don't be like Spotify. Be just better than Spotify.
it's an
Um,
example. It's an example of a low payment model.
Exactly. Yeah. If you want to get away with doing the bare minimum, that's the business model for you to study.
Yep.
The one thing I'm concerned about with AI regulation, and I'm sure that we're going to have more AI regulation, is going to be more difficult to exploit people's data, which is good. But at the same time, it will also block the way of having any other potentially AI companies that create LLMs for as cheaply as they've been created already, to the point that the ones that built them already, like OpenAI, Claude, a couple of others, are going to be the only LLMs on the market that are far more advanced than anything else, because no one's going to have that. Like the barriers to entry to train AI is going to be either incredibly expensive or so closely guarded that the ones that got away with it are the only ones that are going to stay on the market, and that kind of scares me a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I'm hoping that once people start seeing the value that this can actually return to society when used the right way, that right now we don't see I mean, there's some, but you don't see a huge kind of open source culture in AI. And hopefully
Mm.
we kind of,
Yeah.
start going that direction where things are a little bit more, you have verified data sets and verified LLMs, and you can start to kind of open source those for use for other people. But again, that data is those data sets are trained with a lot of individuals' data. And so having that balance of rewarding people and kind of open sourcing those models is it's going to be very important. And it's going to come down to the will of a human being to do what's right. And so let's just hope that there's people out there that are going to be advocates of doing the right thing.
100%, man. Couldn't agree more. Um, so what do you guys have planned for the next, I guess, year or so in Hedera? Any cool things that you want to tease at the moment?
I mean, the cool things, we're still filling out the governing council. So still bringing in new companies to the council again. Kind of a big shift in focus to, obviously still paying attention to all of our enterprises, but diving really deep into the retail side. Um, so getting a huge focus on DeFi, financial products. Just thinking about the way that we interact with retail users and individual users has been really, since I've kind of come on board 11 months ago, just starting to turn the organization into understanding how important those things are. So I would just say for people, I mean, really look out for a lot of attention coming to the retail space.
Awesome, man. That sounds epic. And I do wish you guys all the best with that. Um, Listen, thanks for the conversation. This has been awesome. And
Yeah.
I can't wait for us to air this.
Yeah. Reach out anytime. This is a great conversation. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Well, have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll keep in touch, brother.
Yeah. Thank you. You too.
Take care. Bye.
Bye bye.